The Democracy Forum brings you another not-to-be-missed webinar, Bangladesh, a new political chapter. Bangladesh's 2026 elections have ushered in a pivotal phase for the nation, with a landslide BNP victory reflecting voters' calls for reform following the 2024 Gen Z revolution. But the new government faces immediate and long-term challenges in translating its mandate into stable governance, economic revival, democratic transition, social stability, and navigating ties with neighboring countries, as well as addressing water sharing and border issues. To learn more about how Bangladesh may have turned the page to a new political chapter, join our live debate to share your questions and comments with our expert panel.
Hello and welcome. I'm Humphrey Hawksley, and this is the Democracy Forum debate, where we examine critical issues often overlooked by mainstream media and commentariat. Today, a nation that is pivotal in so many areas: climate, democracy, extreme Islam, supply chains, and more. Bangladesh, a new political chapter. As BBC correspondent, I covered the 1990 overthrow of Bangladesh's military leader Hussein Mohammad Ershad. The talk then was of new chapters, transformation, democracy, yet 34 years later, similar protests toppled Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. And those in 2024 were even more deadly and violent than those in 1990. So are we heading for a genuine reset? Is Bangladesh capable? To debate and drill down, we have a superb panel of Democracy Forum experts: Rudabeh Shahid, Chietigi Bajpaee, Anasua, Basu Chaudhury, and Saqlain Rizve. The Democracy Forum chair, Barry Gardiner, is with us throughout, and he's going to sum up at the end and possibly challenge our conclusions. And before we start our debate, I have the privilege of asking our president, Lord Charles Bruce, to lay out the background and the canvas of our discussion.
Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar, which considers the future for democratic politics in Bangladesh following the general election 10 weeks ago, the first competitive vote for 12 years. I'm very pleased that our panelists have accepted our invitation to participate today, and I look forward keenly to their contributions and to the panel discussion to follow. I extend my gratitude to the team at Democracy Forum for highlighting this topic and for organising the event today. And I'd like to thank Humphrey Hawksley too for taking the role of moderator. Following the Monsoon Revolution, a student-orchestrated uprising which precipitated the flight of Sheikh Hasina and the collapse of her regime in August 2024, the 12th February election has offered Bangladeshis a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reset their political destiny by participating in a parliamentary vote, together with a constitutional referendum. Building on the political stability achieved by the interim administration of the Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, the holding of free and fair elections is an essential component of a program for fundamental constitutional change, which seeks to prevent a return to autocracy while also determining accountability for atrocities committed by state bodies under Hasina's rule. Although the coalition led by the Bangladeshi National Party, the BNP, under Tariq Rahman, won a two-thirds majority, its landslide victory was made possible by the suspension of its main political rival, the Awami League, and by the fragmentation of the parliamentary opposition into an alliance of 11 different political parties led by Jamaat al-Islami. Commentators were quick to welcome the result. This election was about a suppressed nation reclaiming its voice, wrote Shafkat Munir, head of the Bangladesh Center for Terrorism Research. It's a nation's reconquest of democracy, he added. Bangladesh makes a new beginning with this result. And following the outcome of the constitutional referendum, which achieved a 68% majority in favor, perhaps the biggest test of the new government will be the effective and transparent implementation of the July National Charter, drafted as a template for future governance, The Charter is a politically negotiated document consolidating 80 reform proposals, mostly of a constitutional nature, that have yet to be trialled in Bangladesh, such as a two-term limit on the office of Prime Minister, a Bill of Rights, an independent judiciary, and a bicameral legislature. But as The Economist warns, I quote, the BNP is all too aware that as the party in power, these checks and balances would now constrain itself. And adding inevitably to the challenges faced by the incoming Prime Minister, the conflict in the Middle East, which started barely a fortnight after the election was held, has the potential, I quote, to hit the economy like an earthquake. The resulting energy crisis is depleting foreign reserves and will cause Bangladesh's fuel import bill to increase by 40%. It could reduce GDP by 3% over the next 2 years. And senior government officials concede, I quote, they are firefighting every day. A battle is going on to salvage the economy. Circulating a briefing on Bangladesh last week, the International Crisis Group observes, I quote, while the new government has a clear mandate from voters, whether it can translate that into lasting popularity and stability remains uncertain. As an interim government official noted, after Hasina, people are confident that they can mobilize and take down anyone if they need to. This government has to deliver. Well, thank you very much for deciding to watch our webinar today. And if you have any comments or questions, please pass them to the panel through the chair.
Thank you. Lord Bruce has to deliver. Stability remains uncertain. Our first panelist is the Atlantic Council's Dr. Rudabeh Shahid, a visiting assistant professor at the Department of Government at Wesleyan University. Among her tasks is to train US diplomats. Her research focuses on civil society in post-partition South Asia, citizenship, migration, statelessness, and regional power shifts. So, where does Bangladesh lie amid all that? How would you define a new political chapter? Dr. Rudabeh Shahid, give us your thoughts.
Thank you, everybody at the Democracy Forum for convening this discussion. We're meeting just 2 months after the historic July 12th, 2026 general elections in Bangladesh. I would say this was a moment that marked not just an electoral transition, but a systemic inflection point. The February election did not simply return Bangladesh Nationalist Party to power. This transition followed the interim leadership of Nobel Peace Prize winner Muhammad Yunus. It formally closed what analysts had long called the two Begums era, the decades-long rivalry between former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia that had structured Bangladeshi politics since the 90s. Prime Minister Khaleda Zia passed away in December 2025, and former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, as you all know, is in exile in India. In their place, Zia's son, Tariq Rahman, has emerged with a decisive parliamentary mandate. Now, let's start off with the domestic dynamic. The political dynamic inside Bangladesh today is defined by a delicate balancing act. On one hand, Prime Minister Tariq Rahman governs with a massive mandate. The BNP-led alliance secured 212 seats, a landslide that provides the legislative strength needed to enact the deep structural reforms demanded by the youth movement. These include strengthening judicial independence, rebalancing executive power, and even proposals such as the creation of a new upper house of parliament. In formal institutional terms, the opportunity for reform has rarely been this strong. But on the other hand, Bangladesh is also emerging from nearly 18 months of what many observers describe as episodes of mob rule, a period marked by street-level mobilization, informal enforcement, and the blurring of boundaries between protests and governance. That legacy matters, fortunately or unfortunately. It has reshaped political expectations, normalized extra-institutional pressure, and created a volatile baseline for which formal democratic institutions must now, from which now formal democratic institutions must recover. Compounding this is the significant electoral surge of Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami coalition, which secured 77 seats. This makes it a strong political force, especially in the western border regions of the country. Now, moving on to the regional implications and South Asian stability. At the regional level, the election has already triggered several things in South Asian geopolitics. First, of course, is the India-Bangladesh bilateral relations. After a period of relatively rocky relations during the interim government era, widely perceived as tilting towards China and Pakistan, New Delhi has welcomed PM Rahman's decisive victory. However, this welcome is cautious. India remains attentive to the rise of Islamist forces, viewing it through a security lens, particularly in relation to its northeastern states. Second, Bangladesh is increasingly articulating a desire for strategic autonomy, especially in the Bay of Bengal. The new government appears intent on navigating the competing interests of the United States, China, and India, not by aligning fully with any power, but by hedging across all three. This reflects a broader pattern we see across South Asia's non-nuclear states, an effort to maximize agency within structural constraints. Third, and perhaps most importantly, cross-border stability. Bangladesh's internal politics is inseparable from regional dynamics, particularly the Rohingya crisis and broader migration patterns affecting Myanmar and northeastern India. A stable democratic Dhaka is not just good for Bangladesh, but it is a regional necessity. In conclusion, I would say that Bangladesh's new political chapter is not simply about the return of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP. It is about whether institutions can finally outlast personalities. The closing of the two Begums era created an opening, but not a guarantee, for institutional consolidation. The real test lies ahead. Whether the Rahman government can translate its electoral mandate into durable reforms, deliver economic competitiveness, and maintain regional equidistance in an increasingly contested geopolitical space. Ultimately, the question is not whether Bangladesh has turned the page, but whether it can sustain the narrative. Whether after years of political turbulence, the country can move from cycles of rupture to a more stable democratic equilibrium. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rudabeh. Shahid, Canet, you asked us the questions. What's your feeling? What's your thoughts?
My feeling, it can go two ways, of course. So as an analyst, it's hard to predict. It has not even been 100 years. Sorry,
Okay.
100 days.
If you can't give us, let me put a question to the audience from you, which is one of the obstacles that are in the way by Rimjin Sud. How will the new government manage representation of the Band Awami League's millions of voters to avoid a future return to revenge politics?
Thank you for that question. That is actually a very valid question. So, the Awami League, as many of you know, has been barred from elections. In the elections that just happened in February, they could not vote. But of course, there's a context to that. So, the Awami League won a landslide in 2008, but after that, the country has gone through 3 electoral cycles, which are very problematic to say the least. Issues of voter intimidation, ballot box filling, and so on. But moving past that, it's true that it has a lot of supporters. Now, in the last election, we see trends of a lot of them shifting to the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Whether that's out of ideology or whether it is a real ideological change or whether it is just for the time being, that is hard to predict, but that's what happened. A lot of them also voted from my sources in the field for the Jamaat Islami itself. And the Awami League, for people who are critical of them, and still won them back somehow in some form. Well, they say a few things. First is it has to be without the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Now the party is very centered around her. So how that would happen is very hard to predict. The second thing would be there should be a genuine apology for what happened in July.
Can I just the question is, I think what the question is essentially is can Bangladesh have a legitimate democracy if so many people are excluded? Yes or no?
So, well, this is not a yes or no question. So in February, what we see was that the voter turnout was 60%. So which is high. So if you take that as a measure, probably yes. But if you think of the voter base of the Awami League, probably no. So there are two answers that you'll get from me, unfortunately.
Okay, but can it be legitimate if they're excluded?
Well,
will there be this future return to revenge politics, as the question says?
If you see the cycle, the electoral cycles in Bangladesh, and you've covered that in the 90s, there was a lot of expectations that parties would work together, and that did not quite happen. So if a large population is barred from the electoral process, that is a concern. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Stay with us because we will be coming back to you. Our second panelist is Dr. Chietigi Bajpaee, a Senior Research Fellow for South Asia at the Asia Pacific Programme at Chatham House here in London. He has worked with top think tanks around the world and has been published widely. In a recent piece for Nikkei Asia, he warned that Bangladesh's elections risked being a betrayal of the street protests and a return to business as usual. What would it take, Chietigi Bajpaee, for you to be proved wrong on that? Give us your argument.
Thank you, Humphrey. So yeah, it's good to be back presenting at the Democracy Forum. So a few initial thoughts and building on what the previous speaker said. So clearly, it is an important moment for Bangladesh. The 13th parliamentary election in February saw the country revert back to democratic rule after 18 months under this period of the interim government led by Nobel Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus. It's the first time in 15 years that Bangladesh has a government which is not led by the Awami League. That's the party of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who was ousted in 2024. Tariq Rahman is notably Bangladesh's first democratically elected, I believe, male prime minister in 35 years. And this follows the era of what we often call the battling Begums, when power would sway, often violently, between Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia. And all the other male leaders like Muhammad Yunus were either interim leaders or caretaker prime ministers. Alongside the polls, we saw, of course, this the electorate voting on the July National Charter, these proposed political reforms, which are essentially aimed at diluting the powers of the prime minister, deterring the possibility of a return to the increasingly autocratic rule that we'd seen under Sheikh Hasina. The elections themselves, they proceeded largely smoothly, voter turnout over 60%. There was concerns about violence in the run-up to the polls. We, of course, did see some isolated incidents, but no large-scale violence. So that is all positive. That being said, and this builds on what I mentioned in my Nikkei piece, the so-called monsoon revolution in 2024 was framed as a second liberation for the country. Muhammad Yunus famously proclaimed that a new Bangladesh had begun. That may be the case, but the new prime minister, Tariq Rahman, he's the son of a former prime minister, son of a former president. The two parties that performed most strongly in the election, the BNP, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, and Jamaat-e-Islami, they're both long-established parties. They outperformed the newer party, the NCP, the National Citizens Party, which only secured 6 seats as opposed to over 200 seats for the BNP, over a 2/3 majority. So I think in that context, it is really worth asking if it is a fresh start for Bangladesh, or if it's a return to business as usual. I mean, we've already seen some examples of this. The Bangladesh Bank, that's the central bank governor, was replaced with a BNP official. All 3 members of the Anti-Corruption Commission resigned in March. So I think that could lead to this sense of betrayal among groups that spearheaded the monsoon revolution and wanted to shift away from this era of dynastic politics. And in the worst case scenario, you could see a revival of the politics of protest. I think much will depend on the willingness and ability of the new government to follow through with the reform agenda. And this means implementing the proposed reforms of the July National Charter. But having done so well in the election, I think there are concerns that the BNP may be reluctant to dilute its powers through the proposed political reforms, which include creating a new upper house of parliament, imposing term limits on the prime minister, the president having greater oversight over the prime minister. And then related to this is the question that you had posed about moving towards some genuine national reconciliation, which would entail some sort of rehabilitation of the Awami League, the party of Sheikh Hasina. Otherwise, again, we would see this cycle of revenge politics continue, and social unrest, which has so often plagued the country, would continue. So I think, I would draw parallels to, for instance, the de-Baathification efforts in Iraq following the US-led invasion in 2003, which ultimately proved to be unsustainable and led to greater instability. And just to conclude, I think it's important to frame all of this in a broader context. The election, I think, does say something about the state of democracy in South Asia. It shows that while South Asia's democracies are far from perfect, they're more robust than generally perceived. And I think that also matters when we talk about the state of democracy globally, given that South Asia accounts for almost a quarter of the world's population living in a democracy, or almost half the world's population actually living in a democracy. Bangladesh is the 8th most populous country. So in some ways, what happens in Bangladesh can be seen as a canary in the coal mine for developments in South Asia and the global South more broadly. And then finally, I mean, we've seen a string of Gen Z or people power movements across the region and across the global South more broadly. In South Asia alone, we saw governments ousted in Nepal last year, Bangladesh in 2024, Sri Lanka in 2022. And these are all countries facing economic distress, demographic pressures, governance challenges. So I think developments in Bangladesh can't really be looked at in isolation. There's more I want to say about this, but as well as Bangladesh's foreign policy and relations with India and China. But let me stop there and hand back to you, Humphrey.
Thank you very much for that. Can you just ground us, because Dr. Shahid talked about the ideological differences. Could you ground us in 1 or 2 words? Awami League, BNP, Jamaat-e-Islami, where do they all stand?
Well, I think we have seen clearly I would say a shift, a slide to the right. So I would say Jamaat and the BNP are all. I mean, Jamaat, I would say BNP is center right. Obviously, the Jamaat is far more. It's a religiously oriented party. In terms of and I would also add, despite the fact that it did not perform well in the election, it has emerged as a much stronger political force as the country's primary opposition party. It's more than tripled the number of seats that it previously held. I think it previously held only 18 seats in parliament. During the election, Jamaat in itself, I think it focused more on what it called the spirit of the July revolution. So issues of social justice, corruption, unemployment, and that I think helped to strengthen its position. But as I said, it does maintain this conservative, orthodox ideology. It notably didn't field any female candidates during the election. So that I think, that's probably Jamaat in a nutshell. The BNP, it's a long-established party. It's been around since 1978 with a well-established, well-entrenched support base. And as we heard, I think some of the the vote bank for the Awami League shifted over to the BNP. It's seen as perhaps as a safer choice among more secular voters. But I say, yeah, we've clearly seen, I would say, a slide to the right under following the election.
A slide through there. And can I put a question to you from Philip Bowman, which is a topic you did want to touch on? How will Bangladesh balance its Bangladesh First policy between India and China?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a struggle. I think the government has talked about maintaining, and I would say that if there's any area of continuity between the Awami League, Sheikh Hasina government and the current BNP government, it's this attempt to maintain a balanced foreign policy. The Awami League government had talked about being a friend to all and a malice to none. That's a slogan that it had used. I think a lot of that is fueled by considerations of economic diplomacy, attracting foreign investment, maintaining foreign remittances, maintaining Bangladesh's importance as an investment hub. But obviously, that's much easier said than done, as the question I think alludes to. In this world of growing geopolitical polarization, bifurcation, I'm not, of course, just referring to the Ukraine conflict or the Iran conflict, but also U.S.-China relations, India-Pakistan relations, India-China relations. So I think it is going to be much easier said than done. And the Bangladesh First foreign sort of motto or slogan, I think, alludes to the rhetoric or echoes the rhetoric that we see in many other countries in this age of renewed populism or economic nationalism. I think it is going to be an uphill battle to some degree to maintain that balance.
But on that note, another question has come in by Rashid Ali on the trade. Can Bangladesh's new government accelerate export diversification beyond the ready-made garment sector?
Whether it can is I would say that it must accelerate. I mean, these are some of the broader structural reforms that Bangladesh desperately requires, diversifying the economy away from its overwhelming dependence on textile and garment exports that currently account for over 80% of of the country's exports. You need to, I think, beyond that, there's a need to expand the tax base, create more fiscal space for proposed social welfare programs. There's a need to address corruption, which I think was one of the reasons why Jamaat improved its electoral performance, strengthening state institutions. I think the BNP is in a much better position than say the interim government was in trying to implement some of these reforms, given its strengthened mandate. But it remains to be seen if it can actually deliver on this.
If it can. Thank you very much for that. Stay with us because these topics are going to come back and flow into our debate. We will be back with you very shortly after this very short break. Welcome back. We've hearing so far about a multipolarity, if that's the right phrase, of Bangladesh trying to hedge and juggle both sides, the need to diversify its economy. And there are going to be other issues coming up. Our third speaker is Dr. Anasua Basu Chaudhury, a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation's Neighbor Initiative. She's the editor of ORF Bangla and specializes in regional and sub-regional cooperation in South Asia, energy politics, forced migration, women in conflict. She's a regular contributor to peer-reviewed journals, newspapers, and magazines, and she knows the fractures toward building institutions, whether that is relations with India or the energy crisis from the current Iran war. Anasua Basu Chaudhury, is there any chance of a new political chapter? Tell us what you know.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share some of my ideas with you all. You know, the ongoing US-Iran war has triggered a global economy shock as well as energy shock, with one of its most serious consequences being a disruption of fuel flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly 1/5 of global energy trade, actually, we know that passes through these maritime choke point, and the developing and also poor countries from South Asia, they are really, really affected with this situation. And that the impact had been very, very severe so far as Bangladesh is concerned. And the Bangladesh is among the most vulnerable, as it was already facing economic stress and energy shortage. But I think it is to be kept in mind that this situation is not for the first time that Bangladesh is facing since near past, because we have seen that the consequence of COVID-19 and also the consequence of Russia-Ukraine war, the Bangladesh has faced this kind of severe situation so far as energy, transmission is concerned. Now, if you look at Bangladesh's energy basket very quickly, we see that during 2023-25, it remains heavily reliant on fossil fuels. 49% of total energy supply actually is for the fossil fuels, and 26.5% constitutes oil and petroleum products. And so far as the renewable energy is concerned, only 2%, though the installed renewable generation capacity is reported at 5.24% of total capacity. Now, it's very interesting to note that Bangladesh depends heavily on imports for around 95% of its oil and 30% of its gas requirements. And between January 2025 and February 2026, the country imported approximately 20.69 lakh tons of crude oil, of which 63% came from UAE, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. The remaining 37% came from other sources. So the crude oil is processed by Eastern Refinery Limited, and the main problem at this moment that Bangladesh, the country, is facing the severe gas shortages, and the shortages have also intensified. And it has been cited by different reports that Bangladesh is short of more than 1,300 million cubic feet of gas per day. And so the situation is also very, very bad so far as electricity generation is concerned. Bangladesh is also facing a widening electricity shortfall, and the gap is constantly, demand and supply gap is constantly increasing, and the apprehension prevails here that the gap may increase up to 3,000 megawatts. Now, government has been following a kind of reactive policies. Emergency conservation measures have included temporary closure of universities, early scheduling of Eid festival holidays, and directives encouraging efficient electricity use, such as maximum day usage of daylight hours, and reducing a non-essential consumption. So this is currently a situation where also we have got reports that out of 143 power plants, almost 71 plants are either idle or operating below capacity because of shortage of gas. And also we have been talking about the importance of ready-made garment factories, RMG, which Dr. Bajpaee has specified that it constitutes almost over 80% of national exports. Also, it has got a kind of shock because some factories are operating only, at 30 to 40% capacity. So this is a kind of situation, and the apprehension prevails there that Bangladesh's GDP by it can fall by as much as 3% over the next few years, though the fact remains that Iran's Security Council reportedly approved the near Hormuz after diplomatic efforts. The 6 Bangladeshi fuel carrying vessels they have approved, and Dhaka has also approached multilateral leaders for their help, and these institutions are World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and our Asian Development Bank, and also International Monetary Fund. Now, my main point is that it has also been stated in different reports, and it has been stated by analysts that 3 main causes are behind this kind of energy shock due to this uncertainty, as Mr. Bruce also identified that stability remains uncertain. 3 important important factors that I have also been pointed out. One is heavy dependency on imported fuel that I have also. The second is renewable energy, which is important. Is weak planning. It is that to understand, the crisis situation also often gives us a kind of opportunity. So if we think in that way, then probably I can put forth mainly 2 arguments that the new Bangladeshi government can actually think of, strengthening multilateral. Because I think Dr. Shahid has mentioned about Bangladesh's role in the Bay of Bengal, and Dr. Bajpaee has mentioned Bangladesh's autonomy in the Bay of Bengal region. So I would like to put forth the case of BIMSTEC, as we know that this is the only organization, only institution which is catering the demands of the Bay of Bengal littoral states. So Bangladesh can join India, or India and Bangladesh both can work together to enhance cross-border electricity trade. As we know that in the BBIN region, we have started, exporting and importing. Bangladesh actually is importing electricity from Nepal through India's transition network. So it can be enhanced multilaterally. This is number one. Number 2, that
Anasua, I'm afraid we're running out of time. So can I jump in just to sort of get a sum up there? I mean, it's a really, really interesting, but unless Bangladesh gets this energy conundrum right, they cannot diversify their economy. They cannot grow. So the energy is the key thing to opening this new chapter. Yes,
absolutely right. Absolutely right. So there is a need for early diversification, and the experts are looking for diversification towards renewable energy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. I want to come back to you if we do have time, because that's a fascinating point. But thank you very much. And we're now going to go to our 4th panelist, Saqlain Rizve, who's a journalist in Bangladesh, in Dhaka at the moment, with the Diplomat, the Business Standard, the Lowy Institute, and many other international outlets. He's meticulously chronicled the past 2 years in one piece describing Bangladesh as being between democratic promise and political peril. We've just heard some fascinating contributions there, at least about the energy. What will save it from peril, Saqlain Rizve, and what current threats will take it into peril? Tell us what you know.
Okay, thank you for having me. It has been about 3 months since Bangladesh held its election, and we all knew that Bangladesh Nationalist Party won a strong two-thirds majority. On the other side, an Islamist coalition led by Jamaat Islami, which also includes the youth-led National Citizen Party, has emerged as the main opposition. Now, just 3 months into the new parliament, the main issue is now on the ground or in the parliament is that the constitutional reforms, how it will be implemented. And we are already seeing tension. For example, the opposition has walked out of parliament several times over disagreements and even staged a few street rallies over the issue. Uh, Actually, these reforms come from the July Charter, which was signed by more than 20 political parties in October last year, including the BNP and Jamaat. Later, a national referendum was held alongside the election, where more than 60% of voters supported it. Also, there was tension in terms of there was supposed to be a constitutional reform council to turn these reforms or ideas, whatever we called, into real constitutional changes within 180 working days. But that process has slowed because BNP leaders argue that the council does not have proper constitutional authority and that reforms should go through parliament. However, the opposition says the referendum created a political obligation that should be implemented quickly. At the same time, there is another complex issue over the ordinances passed during the interim government. During that period, 133 ordinances were issued. So far, most have been approved or amended, but around 16 are still under review. And these are sensitive because they include judicial reform, anti-corruption, and especially enforced disappearance. So even with a clear mandate for reform, disagreement over how to move forward is already slowing things down. And then one of the most important outcomes of this of the election was the rise of Jamaat Islami. There are several reasons behind this. First, there is a generational shift. Many younger voters are less influenced by the politics of 1971. That doesn't mean people have forgotten it, but the overused narrative during the Awami League government has made many people feel irritated. It created a sense that the history was being overused or turned into something political. Second, there is frustration after the fall of the previous government. People expected visible change. In many places, they did not see it because corruption and local power structure continued to be the same, and Jamaat benefited from that contrast. Third is organizational because Jamaat has a strong organizational presence, especially in town and small town areas. They do more than welfare work and consistent campaigning than mainstream political parties, and it has tried to reposition itself, focusing more on governance and especially the anti-corruption rhetoric. Also, there is no Awami League, and I mean Awami League out of the election. Many voters had more space to choose alternatives. So that's why a party that traditionally had around 5 to 10% vote now has more than 30% votes. And on the economy, the situation is quite different, difficult too, because the new government has inherited high inflation, which is around still 9%, weak financial institutions, and pressure on foreign reserves. Inflation for most of the people, higher prices for food, transport, and daily essential. Also, the latest war in the Middle East affecting the economy. At the same time, the garment sector, which brings in over 80% of export earnings, is under stress. Nearly 400 factories have shut down over the past 3 years, especially in the 1.5 years of the interim government period, and more are at risk due to rising cost and a difficult business environment. And uh, finally, on the foreign policy, relations with India went through a very difficult phase after the fall of the Awami League, which had been a close partner of New Delhi. Public sentiment also became more openly critical of India. At one point, tensions were quite high. But even before the election, we started seeing some gradual improvement. There were high-level contacts. For example, Mr. Jaishankar's visit to Dhaka and engagement between both sides. After the election, the new government has shown willingness to engage. Then the interim government and India also appears ready to work with the current leadership. However, still some issues remained unresolved. The question of Sheikh Hasina's extradition is still sensitive. Visa operations are not fully normal yet, and the Ganges water sharing treaty will expire in December 2026. So relations are improving, but there are still complexity. So overall, Bangladesh today sits between a democratic promise and political risk over many things like reform issues, economy, and foreign policy. There is a clear demand for reform, but also visible disagreement on how to achieve it. Economic pressures are also real thing, and the war in the Middle East and the regional environment is shifting. So Bangladesh is still dealing with reform tensions, economic pressure, and the changing regional environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think your screen might have frozen for some of that for our audience out there, but we could hear you well enough. Before moving on, you gave us a raft of challenges there. Do you agree with Dr. Chaudhury that energy is the primary, the one to focus on to start getting this right?
Yes, obviously, because we are seeing that in the fuel station there are long lines of vehicle. There is a panic among citizens, and
Okay.
yes.
So that is the clear priority. And the question from Mohammed Ismail: what impact will Jamaat Islami, as the BNP's main opposition, have on the future of secularism in Bangladesh, or should I add to that the future of Bangladesh?
Okay, thanks for the question. It's a very important question. Obviously, can you please give me a few seconds to read the question?
It's what impact will Jamaat Islami, as the BNP's main opposition, have on the future of secularism in Bangladesh? And my own ad is, what will it have on the future of Bangladesh itself?
Okay, so many experts and analysts believe that the secularism politics is in danger in Bangladesh because the existing political parties are now either center right or more right leaning, and we saw the rise of Islamist coalition, which was led by Jamaat Islami, and
Is that a bad thing, though? I mean, would Jamaat Islami help or hinder the need for energy diversification, economic diversification, relations with India, that sort of thing? Could you explain how they would be bad or how they would be good?
Okay, Jamaat Islami, first of all, or that opposition blocks. So one of the main rhetorics is anti-India rhetoric, and in terms of the energy management or economic management, I'm not sure how will they or how they manage, because they have never ruled the country yet.
And okay, do they have a policy on it?
Not yet any clear or visible policy.
So they don't have a policy on the main critical challenge facing Bangladesh. Thank you, Saqlain, for that. I want to go back now around the thing. So if I could just come to you first, then go back around, ask the whole panel. We've got this sort of panoply of challenges. Just sum up in one sentence what you think the biggest challenge is and whether it can be overcome. Saqlain?
Hello.
Yes. Did you hear that?
Can you please repeat?
Yes. Just give us in a nutshell the biggest challenge facing Bangladesh and whether it can be overcome in a new chapter.
Okay, the next biggest challenge are the reform issue and the economic issue, because there are still unemployment, there is still inflation, and also pressure on foreign reserve, and it's only less than 90 days. So it's hard to say now that how the government will cope up with the upcoming challenges.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Shahid, if you were, what is the biggest priority of the government at this time?
I think Saqlain and Dr. Chaudhury has already addressed this. It's the economy. And the reason is very simple. You don't have to look at what he has done, PM Rahman, in the last 90 days or so. But you have to just look at what brought down the government of Sheikh Hasina. And that was basically, there's a youth bulge in the country. And at the same time, there is unemployment, jobs are not enough. And there's huge dependence on remittance and ready-made garments, right? As that has been talked about. So the economy, the economic management, diversification, getting the youth jobs, which would help if you diversify the economy. That is the main challenge. And of course, to add to that, now we have issues in the Middle East, which Dr. Chaudhury has talked about. So energy issues that would also affect the economy. So economic management, number one. And yes, just to add to that, Bangladesh and Nepal, no wonder they've had the youth toppling the government. Gen Z, they're there, and it's the median age in both the countries is 28 years. So yes, so it's absolutely the economy.
So it's absolutely. Chietigi, Bajpaee, do you agree with that? And if so, which bit of the economy has to be fixed first? You can't do everything at once.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. So I think, the economic plight very much lies at the heart of the country's political instabilities. I mean, the unrest that we saw in 2024 was sparked by this somewhat esoteric issue of public sector job quotas for families of war veterans. The country remains in the midst of an IMF bailout. It was set to graduate from least developed country status this year, but the government has requested this to be delayed. And it's important to remember that not too long ago, Bangladesh was being held up as a poster child for the global South. At one point, its per capita GDP, its GDP growth rate, its female workforce participation rate, all of those surpassed that of India. So the interim government has taken some actions to try and stabilize the country, and we've also seen the new government unveil this 180-day plan for addressing some of these challenges. But it's frankly going to be easier said than done. Interest rates remain high. That's deterring private investment. Inflation remains high. The banking sector remains under strain with high levels of non-performing loans, and then added to that, of course, is what we've already discussed: these broader geopolitical instabilities from the Iran conflict, which is not only affecting energy prices, but I would also add foreign remittances. Gulf Arab states account for almost half of Bangladesh's remittance income. So I think, the new government will have its hands full in dealing with a lot of these challenges.
Huge hands full, and needs a lot of capacity and capability. Dr. Chaudhury, was Bangladesh a false poster child? Are we now seeing what it really was?
Sorry.
Was it a false poster child in that it was held up as a model of the global South, and now is stripped away in this debate? We're seeing all these challenges that it's got.
It's very interesting. I'll go back to the narratives of energy security. Yes, you are right. Once it was stated that Bangladesh is very, very, strong, and it's full of natural gas. So natural gas was surplus. But nowadays, it has become a kind of irony that Bangladesh is forced to import, LNG, and heavily dependent on imported oil. But at the end, I think I would reiterate two important things. First is the crisis will give us opportunity to strengthen neighborhood ties. We have seen that
sorry, because we're at strengthen neighborhood ties, and the second one?
And the second one is, dependency on 3F and 3R. 3F means fading fossil fuels, and 3R, which is related to rising resilient renewables.
Okay,
This
thank you.
should be the framework for a new government in Bangladesh.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Please stay. We are now going to the chair of the Democracy Forum, Barry Gardiner MP, who has been listening throughout and is going to analyze and sum up our debate. Barry, over to you.
Oh, goodness me, Humphrey. Right. Well, thank you to our four contributors. Five, because I should start with Charles, who set out the background, the reset under Muhammad Yunus, the need to prevent a return to autocracy, the huge majority that BNP had got, and the alliance of the 11 political parties, and I liked his phrase, which I think was a quote. He said, "A suppressed nation regains its voice." But he did add, "But they're firefighting every day to secure the economy." And really, I think that's probably where we've ended up in the discussion. It is a government that has to deliver, he said, but it's not clear how it's going to do that. Now, Dr. Rudabeh Shahid spoke of a systematic election turning point, a systemic election point, transition following the period of Yunus and the two Begums period. She talked about domestic political change under Tariq Rahman, and the landslide that he had, the demands of the youth movement. And I think as the discussion wore on, it became clear just what a threat that is, but also what a driving impetus that youth movement and its demands are for the current government. Justice system, the two chambers, are these going to be fulfilled, these aspirations that were born out of the demands? And she questioned how the government would deal with that legacy of what she called mob rule. She raised the issue of Jamaat Islamiyah, and then moved on swiftly to talk about India-Bangladesh relations, saying that India had welcomed Prime Minister Rahman, but cautiously so. And of course, that was reinforced later when we heard about the suspicion that Jamaat Islamiyah has for India, the antipathy that underlies that relationship. She also talked about the Rohingya crisis impacting on the region, and said this is not simply the return of the Bangladeshi National Party. Can Rahman govern to create durable reforms and economic competence? So there we have again the economy. You know, Bill Clinton is never far from our discussions, is he? It's the economy, stupid. We always have to come back to the economy. I thought it was a really vital question that one of the listeners to the seminar put in at that point, and that was about how do we deal with the Awami League? How do we avoid the tit for tat, the revenge politics? Can we say that this is really a democratic transition when you have eliminated the Awami League from the polling booth? And I didn't feel that we got a proper response to that, quite honestly. There was an attempt to give the statistics. Oh, well, 60% of the people turned up for the election, and therefore, you know, it's a functioning democracy. Well, it's difficult to see that quite in that light. I think just on the statistics alone, you have to say, well, what are the exclusions here? What are the no-go areas to determine the democracy? Dr. Bajpaee again spoke of the reversion to democratic rule after 15 years, dilution of the PM's powers, and the reduction in the autocratic tendency. But a fresh start, he questioned quite wryly, I thought, when he listed the family history, the dynasty of father, grandfather, and so on. And also the way in which the new Prime Minister had exercised authority over the governance of the National Bank. Term limits for the PM, will they be enforced? One suspects that this may be good intentions, but they need to be borne out. And he talked about the issue of rapprochement. He talked about the de-Baathification in Iraq and the lessons that could be learned from, in a sense, the futility of that. But he said that he felt that it reflected the state of democracies in Asia, people power. He mentioned Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and was very clear that what we now have in the politics of Bangladesh are controlled by essentially two right-wing alliances. And I thought it was, again, very telling that he pointed out that Jamaat-e-Islamiyah had no female candidates standing for them at the election. Again, democracy is not just a matter of votes, it's a matter of votes for all people and representation for all people by all people. So Dr. Chaudhury focused very much on the energy sector, the impact of the Iran war, the disruption that it was posing to the fifth of the world's energy trade, and spoke of the vulnerability that Bangladesh has. Gave the statistics: 49% of fossil fuel dependent, reliant on imports for 63%, and huge shortfalls in gas. The emergency reactive policies, she said, were, closing down industrial plants that were operating. I think she said 71 of them operating either idle or below capacity. Factories operating at 35 to 40% only, she said. So looking at blackouts, looking at the huge problems this is going to cause to the economy. But of course, in order to get the energy or the fossil fuels that Bangladesh is dependent upon to power the economy, you have to have the money to be able to buy the fuel in the first place. So this is a very vicious cycle that she was identifying. And of course, she moved on to say, well, this is causing huge instability, that dependence on imported fuel. She nodded to renewables as a potential way out here, and also to the importation of hydroelectricity from Nepal. Saqlain Rizve, democratic promise and political peril, he said. The main issue was constitutional reforms. Will they be implemented? He spoke of the Constitutional Reform Council, said the sensitive anti-corruption was slowing things down, I think he said. But younger voters were less wedded to history. Welfare to gain support by some of the parties. And the new government, he said, has high inflation. He again talked about the factories that had closed, 400 of them, he said. Relations with India beginning to improve, but that sticking point, that grit in the oyster of Sheikh Hasina's extradition and disagreement on economic progress. So, Humphrey, you posed a challenge to them at the end. You said, what is the biggest challenge that the country faces? It was clear that everybody agreed that it was reforms and the economy, and almost the impossibility of doing one without the other. getting those reforms right, meeting the expectations of that Gen Z population against a backdrop of huge instability, a lack of jobs, a failure to satisfy the aspirations of a young population because the jobs weren't there, the economy wasn't functioning, a false poster child. It may be a new political chapter, but one suspects that it's the chapter of a book which ultimately is a tragedy.
Is a interesting conclusion, Barry, but thank you very much from that. My notes as you were talking that Jamaat Islami, the main opposition, no women and no energy policy, and both of those are needed to make the economy work. So they're definitely not the solution. We are going to come back. Times Wing Charities attacking, but before we end, I want to go around the panel again, exactly as we started. Bangladesh, a new chapter. Barry has given his conclusion. What are yours? Rudabeh, Shahid.
My conclusion, well, I think we've covered it all. So reforms, economy, and then, yes, I would refer back to the question that was asked to me about what happens to the Awami League. That is dependent on the policymakers, fortunately or unfortunately, not analysts like us. So I'll wrap it up here.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Chietigi, Bajpaee.
Yeah, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, in some ways, the country is in uncharted territory with the proposed reforms of the July National Charter. In some ways, we're seeing continuity with the BNP back in power, the cycle of revenge politics, the ban on the Awami League, the need for a move towards genuine national reconciliation. But the one point that I made in my initial remarks, I would just reiterate that you can't look at what's going on in Bangladesh in isolation. And there needs to be, I would say, to some degree, regional solutions to regional problems. I mean, a lot of the things we've discussed, from energy security to issues of poor governance to sort of the economic challenges facing facing Bangladesh, to the demographic challenges facing the country. I think you could say that for several countries across South Asia and the broader global South. So I think, there obviously isn't a one-size-that-fits-all approach in the trajectory in some of these, Gen Z movements that we've seen, but it does point to the need for potential regional solutions to some of the regional challenges that Bangladesh and other countries are facing.
Common shared challenges. Thank you very much for that. Perhaps another Democracy Forum debate on that issue. Anasua, Basu, Chaudhury, your conclusion in a couple of words.
Yes, I'll put forth the urgency for diversification of energy basket and reliance more and more on renewable energy, which ultimately leads Bangladesh towards balancing its neighborhood ties. It will strengthen its relation with India, as well as its dependency on renewable energy on China.
Yeah. Energy, which you need to drive the economy. That's a brilliant point you've raised there. Saqlain, Rizve.
I think the government should handle expertly the reform issues and the economic challenges, including the unemployment issues, because when Sheikh Hasina was ousted, the protest was started based on the job quota system. So unemployment or job issue is real. The government should handle it more expertly and quickly. Otherwise, the situation won't be better.
It will not be it will be a new chapter, but it will have, as Barry said, a similar ending to the other ones. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Rudabeh, Shahid, Chietigi, Bajpaee, Anasua, Basu, Chaudhury, and Saqlain, Rizve. And thank you all at the Democracy Forum for making this debate happen. Our next Democracy Forum debate is at the same time, that's 2 p.m. London time on May the 12th. Water as a weapon, the new age of resource conflict. That is a critical topic with far too little discussion. Please join us then. And until then, stay safe and goodbye.
The Democracy Forum is a not-for-profit organisation founded in 2009 under the patronage of Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne. Its principal goal was to work for the furtherance of democracy, peace and the rule of law in order to counter religious fundamentalism and intolerance in our global communities. In an increasingly fractured world, this goal continues to be the driving force behind all of the Forum's activities. Lord Charles Bruce is the current president of the Forum. Since its inception, the Forum has hosted and co-hosted seminars on a wide variety of topics relating to democracy and human rights across the world. The Democracy Forum encourages academics, students, journalists and other socially and politically conscious people to attend our seminars and to participate in the question and answer session. Details are available on our website, thedemocracyforumlimited.com.